Yeah, it's interesting when you work with somebody and you spend so much time with each other, and then you start realizing and having conversations like, wow,
Yeah.
we're here because we've gone through a lot of the same things.
Right. Maybe not in specific details, but I think that the thing that most drug addicts or alcoholics share is always that feeling of despair, that feeling of desperation and hopelessness, and maybe a lot of the same drug use or alcohol use or what have you.
Yeah. And we rely on a lot of the same tools to get through that, now in recovery.
Right.
And that
Right.
we definitely share with each other.
I came from, by all intents and purposes, a pretty stable home financially, I suppose. A good family from a good area, emotionally abusive household. However, drugs were never a part of my family growing up. I don't think that there was anybody in my family I could necessarily call an alcoholic.
Yeah, interesting. I came from a mom that drank and used, two sisters that drank and used. I was the youngest, and it just seemed like the natural order of things. That's what we did in the house. But I was also taught from a very early age that what happens in our house doesn't leave our house.
Yeah.
So I learned how to live, like a double life very young, where I would go to school and I would present that person to school, and then I would come home and that would be the real me. So what I found in recovery was always kind of hard was connecting those two people and not trying to live a double life and present a certain way and who was the real me. And it's taken some time, but I had to find that.
Right. I think one of the more difficult parts for me was never having that substance abuse education or understanding. I remember the first time I got drunk, I made my own wine. My mom allowed me to make my own wine. She bought me the yeast and the grape juice and all that sort of stuff, and I made it in the closet, and it was just okay. It was just all right. So she might not have been an alcoholic necessarily, but I don't know that it was an environment in which that would have been frowned upon, provided it didn't escape outside of drug or alcohol use.
I definitely have some stories on that, but I think I just made me think of one of the ones, like when I was in junior high, I got in trouble for smoking marijuana outside of the school gym, and when I got home, I wasn't in trouble for smoking the marijuana. I was in trouble that I didn't do it at home. And because what that did was brought the authorities having to talk to my mom, and that's what she didn't like.
Yeah.
I always share this too, that that's what made me who I am today. Like, a lot of people wouldn't believe, that's just one of many stories, but, that is really how I learned, to survive.
Right. Right. I placed blame on my mom for a long time for the way my stepfather was, for what I thought I didn't have, and so on and so forth. And going through recovery, I think that was one of the harder things to get over was, though this has happened, objectively speaking, though this has happened, what is your part in the situation now? And I've come to realize that my part in the situation now is that I'm here now, and I'm still blaming that person for what happened then, and still holding that with me, and it held me back for the longest time from being able to get sober.
I used to think too, well, I use because my mom or my sisters, or I grew up in this house, or I grew up this way, and I had a sponsor that one of the biggest breakthroughs in recovery for me was when she pointed out, she's like, you got a raw deal, so what? Like, you're an adult now. How does that affect what decisions you make and how you live your life? Like, that's what it was, and this is what it is now. So what are you going to do about it? And I was able to hear that. Like,
Yeah.
People had said that to me before, but for some reason I was able to hear that and then take responsibility for my own self at that point. It was a huge breakthrough.
I think it's that level of willingness that going into recovery, and when you're actually taking recovery seriously, you open your heart and your mind and your ears and all that sort of stuff. I was resistant to people telling me to get over it for a long time, because maybe that's not the way to approach it, but I was also just not ready to get over it. I was also not ready to get sober or ready to accept a spiritual solution, if any.
Acceptance, taking responsibility, all of those are just so key. When I was new, one of the things that I use now, this gets me through so many things in life, and I would probably be upset over something, and she would be like, okay, you got 5 minutes to feel sorry for yourself, and then you're going to look at your part in this. What is it? And it could be anything like, well, my boss was, a jerk today, so I was mad, and then she's like, okay, well, what you're really mad at is your ego is hurt, or you feel like somebody's going to take something away from you. And I was like, wow. So now I use that. Like, even if a friend's going through something, I stop and think, well, what's really being affected here?
Oh, yeah.
And that tool gets me through so much in life.
I think a lot of the time in coming into recovery, the comparison people use to how miserable they were is what they lost materially or financially and all that sort of stuff. And that does happen. I think that's a tangible way of establishing how low you got. Homelessness, I was homeless, jail, charges obviously, just stuff like that. And that exists and that's real and I think that's valid to some degree, but moreover, it's the absolute despair that you go through. And I got comfortable with being homeless for a long time. I mean, I remember saying to myself quite often, I'm going to be homeless for the rest of my life. This is awesome. This is freeing.
Yeah.
You know, where did I finally hit that bottom? I think it was emotionally and spiritually. I was just so bankrupt. I didn't have any other options. I didn't necessarily want to die, but I didn't know how to live, as they say in the rooms all the time.
I stopped when I had no other choice. There was no friendly place to turn, no other avenue. Was like, you either do this or you don't. And part of that was because like I was trained by growing up in a using household, basically how to function that way. So I always worked. I paid my bills. I learned that very early. I made sure there was a roof over our head. And what happened was I started having kids and I started watching them watch me, and I didn't want to put them through the same, conditions that I grew up in and turn out like me. But I also didn't know how to do differently. So I wanted to be a good mom, but I had no idea how to live differently. And they took them away from me. They were in foster care, and I got them back, and I had relapsed again, and I was just looking out the window. My son was playing outside, and I had that moment of clarity you hear people talk about all the time, and I was looking at him like, they're going to take him away again, and you're never going to get over it. They're not going to give him back this time. And I imagined myself, like, for the rest of my life, I'm like, you're going to be crying, you're never going to get over this, and you're going to hate yourself for the rest of your life for what you've now put him through because he can't rely on you. And I got clean. I was like, what, please help me do what I can't do for myself, because I had heard it before in the rooms, and I went to a meeting, and I've been clean ever since.
Well, it goes to the point that I was making earlier where I don't have any kids. I don't have any, I was not able to hold a job down. I was not able to have those things materially necessarily, and I wasn't able to function as a normal human being within society. But that moment you talked about of looking out the window, I was looking out of a jail cell, and again, how did I get here again? What do I need to do? And the judge said, you need to go to treatment. And I said, I'm ready to go to treatment. And it's time to go to treatment. And it's time to become a brother again, become a son again, become a grandson again, become a person again. Because I had nothing left. I didn't have anybody left. That gift of desperation, as they call it.
Yeah. Hearing you say that, though, I have so much respect for that, because for me, it was probably an easier decision, I would say, because I had somebody relying on me, and I think I started for my kids. For you to be, young and want to make that change and build a life and just not want to do this anymore, I think it's important for people to know too that we can do this for ourselves.
Right.
People I think are learning a lot younger than they used to, that there's hope and there's options now.
Yeah. I see it here all the time at A Better Today. I see the average age of people coming into treatment going down, and whether or not that's going to be the time that they get it, whether or not it's going to be the time that actually sinks in, there's no saying. But the fact of the matter is we're getting through to people younger, and I think more successfully thereby.
I think so too. I remember going to meetings or whatnot when I was younger, and I wasn't ready, and I didn't feel like it could really relate to the room because they all seemed old. Yeah. You know what I mean? That was back when the people were sitting around smoking cigarettes in meetings, and it just felt like a bunch of old people to me at that time. Now, what I love seeing is, we got the young people's group, we got these people that they find each other, and they're like, no, we're going to live this way now. And I think that's, they're supporting each other. It's great. And
there's no shortage of fellowships. Heroin Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Crystal Meth Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that no matter what you are or who you are, there's somewhere for you to go. And you go into the rooms and you see people who are what society would deem as successful. You see people who were at one point homeless and now can miraculously show up to a job every day. You see people who are in the middle of that, and it's encouraging. Though we might be of different walks of life, we're all the same. We're all the same.
You never know when that moment's when it's gonna make sense. When are you gonna be done? And I think part of it was when I just kept thinking that, well, gosh, this is never gonna work for me because I grew up in that house, because my mom this, because my sister's that, this happened, that happened. And then that one time, all of it made sense when I was ready, you know.
Right.
And so I always tell people on the phone, you know, that when they call here too, like, don't give up hope, because it could be that one person, that one time. You know, I remember being in a meeting and hearing a gal share that at that time she had 11 years, and she talked about growing up with that mom and her sister in that house and coming home from school, and it wasn't the same neighborhood, it wasn't the same situation, but it was the first time I thought, like, wow, she felt like I did. That is what I relate to, and if she could stay clean, maybe I can too. And to be honest, she's still in my life today, so
That's awesome.
That's who I talk to.
I think that in my personal experience, and what I have recommended to quite a few people, is that recovery is one thing. Recovery is the rooms of whatever anonymous program you're in, but treatment is a vital part of that, and a jumping off point to that, and an introduction to that, or a reintroduction to that sometimes. I think that treatment for me, in my story, was entirely necessary in that I got, I think it was 90 days away from where I was. I got 90 days to grow with people who are also mostly looking to grow and to stop using and to become healthy again and to learn how to live. And the introduction to recovery in treatment was absolutely vital and necessary.
Absolutely. Like for me too, you know, for one, I had a safe place to land, and I was in a safe spot, and I was warm and fed, and I really responded to the structure, because life is so chaotic when you're using, and then you get in a safe spot, and I really responded. And then what I found too is, like I was sharing earlier, is I would, maybe if I went to a meeting or something, I would walk in there and present, I would gauge the room and look around and be like, okay, this is who I need to be for the next hour and a half. And that was, you know, early on, and I would present a certain way there, and then I would go home to the same environment I was struggling in. Whereas when you're in treatment, you are with staff 24/7. You're with people that get to know you and understand you and help you recognize what's really going on. Like, you react this way when this happens. This triggers something in you when this happens, and you can start learning some coping skills, how to recognize why you're doing the things you're doing and find a different way to process that.
There's this concept in the rooms of whatever anonymous program you're in that when you get sober, you pick up at the age you left off or you started using at. And provided, I think, your willingness is there, and I started using at 15, so that means when I was 27 and I got sober, I picked up with the mentality of a 15-year-old, but today I have a job, today I have a car, today I have those things again, those material things, of course, financial security. Provided that willingness is there, I think that regardless of how emotionally young you might be, you grow so quickly within recovery, and treatment really kind of facilitates that and pushes that off and allows you to figure out how to live, the structure, the organization, the waking up at 7 a.m. to make your bed.
Yeah.
I can't say I make my bed still, but I definitely needed that at the time, so.
Well, double scrub definitely pays off, because that's how I learned how to clean my refrigerator. My fridge is spotless, and I learned that in treatment.
Right.
But one of the things too that I really think about better today that is so good is, for me, I went to those treatment centers. I was like the model client. I was checking chores. I was the top resident because I loved the safety and I loved the structure. But then when I left treatment, I would go home and completely go back to who I was again, or struggling. And I think that transition is so important. That's why with us, the independent living program is huge, because they are able to transition to where they have more life skills and they get to apply what they've learned in the real world, but still come home to a safe environment with that same support staff that has got to know them the whole time they were here. So the opportunity to transition slowly, gradually, and safely to learn to live on your own and pay rent and function in recovery, but still have requirements as far as the service structure and the sponsorship and meetings and all of that, I think is huge.
And what's nice here at A Better Today, I think, is that it extends beyond that also. We're of different 12-step fellowships, but in both of ours, a vital role is giving back, being of service. And with the A Better Today Alumni Association, we offer that. We're able to tell folks to keep coming back, never leave necessarily. We're always here, and there's so much you can do as an alumni of A Better Today.
Yeah, learning that service structure. I mean, that's what long-term recovery looks like.
Yeah.
It doesn't just magically change overnight because you went to treatment. You have to maintain your recovery, and I do that by being of service to others, and being involved in a fellowship or whatever that looks like for you, whichever one. Doesn't matter. Just get comfortable somewhere.
Yeah.
And you touched a little bit too on I think that we are really understanding when somebody does struggle. Somebody calls and says, I've had a relapse. What do I do? Come home. Because this is your family, and we're going to figure out what we need to do to get you back on track.